How's it going, everybody? Francesco Bologna here from Biohazard Studios. Today is a very special day. Today we commemorate the ending of the Toby Robin Adventures Season 1. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The season finale has dropped. And ladies and gentlemen, all 20 episodes are now available for you to watch right here on youtube.com. And today we're going to be taking a very exclusive look behind the scenes as to how we made the characters, how we made the animation, and a bunch more besides. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoy. Let's get right to it. So you're not going to believe this, ladies and gentlemen, but the story of Toby Robin actually started here. OOM, the Woodland series. I was just looking at DeviantArt, looking at some random art as I would usually do on a weekend morning, and I discovered this kind of artwork which really got me hooked. It looks so good, so cute, and yet these characters, they resonate with the fans a lot. I thought, okay, there has to be one artist that can possibly do this, but I then noticed that there was another artist that can do this kind of art, and apparently he was the originator. And Alan, ladies and gentlemen, this guy is a beast when it comes to artwork. I mean, looking at his art, and you know what, ladies and gentlemen, I give him full credit for making this kind of stuff because I immediately got hooked as soon as I saw this kind of artwork. But here's the funny thing, I actually got drawn in to one specific folder, and that was the folder on the right. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Toby Robin. Doing so, I started getting into these characters. Like, I really started to understand, okay, there's the backstory, what kind of peril they get into, the kind of adventures that they all have to endure, and a bunch more besides. The characters are very memorable, I will say that for sure, and this is literally my type of stories, and I'm not gonna lie, I enjoy these stories. And funny thing about all of this is that then I discovered a treasure trove of stories here on DeviantArt. And apparently the commissioner of some of these stories, Yusaku Jumba. Now, you may notice something on this page. You notice that many of these stories that you actually see before you are actually from Toby Robin Adventures Season 1. That's right, if you look very closely, you'll notice Trouble with Tendrils, Harlequin of Hell, those are all from Season 1. There are also other stories, like 2 short stories, Something Fishy, It's All in the Name. Those are going to be little snippets which will be added to Season 2 as kind of like a joke for, like, in between one of the episodes, in case one of the characters does have to make a joke. I can throw in one of these short stories into it. I've done it before with many episodes, and I can possibly do it again. I've done it before, and I'm not afraid to do it. And then you have this other special story, which is very interesting, Peril of the Princess Guards. I'm thinking about putting that in Season 2 as well, kind of like a sub-story, where Toby is basically watching television, and they're basically watching this show, the Peril of the Princess Guards, which does sound interesting, considering that the characters, the style, their uniform and everything, it almost correlates to Toby Robin, even though it has nothing to do with it. Will probably be added to Season 2, that's for sure, as definitely a sub-story before the next big story arc. And then, ladies and gentlemen, going deeper into this rabbit hole, I came across Toby Robin herself. Ladies and gentlemen, this artist is just an amazing storyteller. I've basically read all of her stories here on DeviantArt, and ladies and gentlemen, worth checking out. I mean, Hostages, The Quicksand Report, The First Serious Case, The Mystery of the Jeweler's Jalopy, I mean, those are classics, and I definitely see myself reading these time and time again. And fun fact, Mystery of the Jeweler's Jalopy is actually the very first episode I ever worked on. And you know what, to be honest with you, it was the funnest episode that I got a chance to work on because I was able to do all kinds of things with the story. But before all of this had to happen, I had to prove to the Tobyverse that I wasn't kidding when I was gonna make an entire season. So we went the extra mile to actually write our own story, our own original Toby Robin story, which we like to call Everything or Nothing. Everything or Nothing is one of the biggest fan stories ever, which is basically divided into 3 parts, and we pretty much wrote the entire story from the ground up. We have original characters, we have reoccurring characters from the Toby Robin series, mainly the trio, being Toby, Terry, and Jody, and then we brought in some brand new villains. We brought in characters from the other show that we work on, Axel Rangers S, basically put them in for a final showdown, because obviously, why the heck would you want these characters to return into Action Rangers X when we're no longer gonna see them anymore? I mean, what's the purpose of bringing them back for a final showdown when we can have the final showdown in another story franchise? And besides, ever since season 9, there hasn't been any other stories written within this very book that corresponds to Astral Ranger's return. There is no other proof. The proof is season 9. Season 9 is actually the very last time we actually get to see Astral Ranger, because this is basically Astro's final stand, and what better way to do it than Everything or Nothing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in order to hype up the fan base of the Toby Robin series, what I had to do was I had to create some posters. So in order to do that, I basically went in and made some promo posters using MS Paint. MS Paint, for those of you that do not know, is my official canvas, which is what I use to make all the animations. So it's pretty much your typical Microsoft Paint painting program, which you would usually get with a copy of Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, Windows XP, and all the other Windows besides. This is the canvas that I use to do Toby Robin as well as Action Rangers X episodes. Now, as I said, to make these posters, I had to do some deep dive into Google to pick up some backgrounds, and usually I would always give credit whenever credit is due. So this is actually one of the posters. This is actually the first poster I ever did of Toby Robin Adventures. It started with Toby Robin with the quicksand. You can actually see in the background, quicksand, say away. I put Toby Robin in it because I wanted to make her sing, and of course her dialogue box usually always there. And then meanwhile, as I did this, I was thinking of how to create the story of Everything or Nothing. So I remembered there was this one story that I actually did work on before all of this. It was called Control-Alt-Delete. And Control-Alt-Delete was actually the very first story, and for the very first time in the history of this story, Void Ranger fought the very first nanobot. And in the story, Void Ranger defeated it and realized, okay, it cannot be just one nanobot. There has to be more out there. And that's where Everything or Nothing comes in. So in poster number 2, we see Void Ranger with his weapon, his axe, and we see all the nanobots behind him. And for those of you that don't know, that gray text box on the right, that's Master Titanium speaking. And of course, Void, you truly have the most dangerous taste for a mystery. Of course, Master Titanium's voice, I can't really see it that big because, I mean, don't want to get a noise complaint, but basically, this is basically the start of Everything or Nothing. And then I went on to making even more posters to support the story. So then came this one. This one was definitely wake-up call for the entire story itself. I introduced a new character that we pretty much see throughout basically all the boss fights. And yes, there will be boss fights in Everything or Nothing, and this guy is basically the first. His name is Blizzard Ranger, and he is a brand new character for Axel Ranger's S. Fun fact, he is actually the rival of Crusher. So if you don't know Blizzard or Crusher, basically these two characters are big behemoths. They are almost the same size, they are heavyweights, and they will literally beat the living hell out of each other when they face off. And that's the beauty of Axel Ranger's S. There's always these amazing rivalries between heavyweights, lightweights, featherweights, and it's a lot of fun just to make them fight in the middle of a ring. But yeah, in this picture you can actually see Blizzard is picking up Void Ranger. Void Ranger's asking,
I know the best we should just talk about this.
he slams him into the crates.
I guess.
Yeah, and with that, the first boss fight begins as soon as Void Ranger leaves the crate injured. So yeah, that's pretty much one of the big posters. It's pretty much to highlight the first boss fight of Everything or Nothing, and from there it pretty much continues from there. And so then we had this one, which is definitely one of my favorites. This is the battle in the crematorium, where Void Ranger fights for the second time the second nanobot. And of course, the nanobots, they are basically DNA of MLG gamers whose consoles have been hacked and bricked. So basically what happened is, in the story you have these players which are actually playing like real games like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, any game on any console, and basically these people are actually playing as the nanobot. And so what they're actually doing is they are interacting with this MLG gamer online, whom you may know as Dr. Yayakov, because apparently he is a gamer. And what happens is they're playing jackpot for their console. So basically they're playing a game of Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, The Division, any of those games. They are playing jackpot for their console. And the deal is, if they lose, their consoles get destroyed by the viruses that they put inside the console. So basically what happens is, when they interact with these people, for example, an MLG gamer interacts with Yayakov. Yayakov, for those of you that do not know, is this guy. He is the guy in purple. He is one of the main baddies responsible for this scheme. And basically what happens in this scene, it's another boss fight, except what happens is he sends 4 nanobots after Void. And Void's job is to basically defeat them before he goes after Yayakov to deliver the final kill. And basically, in this story, when you have a gamer, like a real gamer, interacting with Yayakov, basically in the story, he will install malware onto your game console, and you have to play jackpot in order to save your console. If you lose against Void Ranger, because obviously the nanobots are the players, if they lose against Void Ranger, their consoles get bricked. And what happens is, the malware, it's actually 2 kinds of malware. You got Stuxnet, and then you got MyDoom. MyDoom is capable of DDoSing websites. So when MyDoom hits, you cannot go online to contact developers for support. So basically, you're screwed either way. And then Stuxnet, which is the other virus, it destroys your game console. I don't know if you've ever heard of Stuxnet, but Stuxnet was responsible for the destruction of the uranium enrichment program in Iran. So basically what we did was we took Stuxnet and we thought, okay, what would be another good device that Stuxnet can destroy? Obviously we thought, okay, if it's good at destroying computers, what about game consoles? So we did exactly that, and now basically every time a game console gets destroyed, the player is obviously killed, and then their game consoles are retrieved by Yayakov and all the all the fugitives, and then what happens is they take these consoles, they rebuild them, modify them, and then they create more nanobots. And with these nanobots, they can control an entire army. So think about this, for example. One bricked game console can basically control 4 nanobots at the same time. So the more game consoles you can basically collect, the more nanobots you have the power to control. So yeah, that's pretty much Yayakov. These are 2 of the 4 nanobots that Void Ranger is fighting. And then from here, we got, as I said, this scene. So in this scene, we got poor Toby hanging for dear life. She's being lowered into the fire. We got Void Ranger fighting the second nanobot in the series. And of course, it's going to be a very dangerous fight because obviously you got the smoke inhalation. You got Void Ranger trying to survive all the attacks of the nanobot. And of course, Void Ranger has to rescue a new friend. And then from here, this is the next scene that we had. Unfortunately for this scene, we didn't really keep the background, unfortunately, but we did maintain the same type of scene. So what we did here in this scene, this is Witch Ranger. This is one of the main female villains. She's basically the femme fatale of the series, and basically she is throwing Toby off a helicopter after she kidnapped her. And why is she doing this? Because basically Toby knows about this whole nanobot scheme because she was the one who went in the mines to discover all of this. And obviously Witch Ranger's first instinct, no witnesses. She throws Toby off the helicopter. Void has to go in and save her. Again, we did not keep this background. This is supposed to be an open field mine. We changed it into a tropical forest castle, but the scene is still there. So basically Void has to go in and save Toby. Witch Ranger drops her off the castle and Void has to dive into the water. So simple as that. Another thing, we did not keep those nanobots. What we did instead was we replaced them with the security rangers that you all know and hate from Action Rangers X. You know, the ones that go, sound the alarm! So yeah, those rangers are back. They are there in the scene of Castle to Bay when Void Ranger is doing a bit of snooping, trying to uncover the secrets of Astral Ranger's plan. The train chase. This is definitely a memorable one. This is the very first time Void and Toby ever meet. And of course you can actually see the fist in the corner. That is Blizzard Ranger trying to catch Void Ranger as he's chasing him through the train. And this is actually what happens after the boss fight between Void and Blizzard. So basically Void escapes, Blizzard is on a rampage, and Void has to rescue Toby before all hell breaks loose. After all of this, we get a little fun time with Void and Toby. They're basically introducing each other and telling each other about themselves, and you know, it's a simple social interaction. This last piece, which I did, which was the final poster, I definitely did some major changes to this one. Now, the thing about this scene, first of all, this entire background, we did not use it. We replaced it with a space station instead. But we did keep the big nukes and the nanobots themselves, but we altered them to make them more menacing, and we've added another type of nanobot, which is a blue nanobot, which, if you look at the differences between the colors, you got the gold gigabot, which is the golden nanobot. This one is basically the leader. Then you have these red nanobots, which are basically the soldiers, the MLG players playing for a game of jackpot for their consoles. And then you have the blue ones, which are basically the same thing, except the blue ones have the power of invisibility. But even if they hack their own game consoles just to mod the game and everything, they're still playing jackpot for their data. So basically, regardless which kind of nanobot it is, they're gonna get screwed because Void Ranger is the main player and the MLG players are unfortunately victims playing jackpot for their data, which is very sad, but at the end of the day, this is Astro's plan. And actually, as you can see from this final poster, you can actually see Astro for the very first time. That blue figure at the top is in fact Astro. Now, originally, when you actually think about this piece, I actually wanted to put RA9 as the main villain. RA9, for those of you that do not know who he is, he was the main villain for the first 10 seasons of Axum Rangers X, and then he became a Rogue Ranger, as you've seen in the later episodes. But yeah, this is Master RA9. I originally wanted him to be the main villain, but then I thought, nah, that's not gonna make any sense. How are we gonna know? What kind of proof can we show that Master RA9 is the villain? And because we wanted Astro to have his final stand against Void, let's change it. Let's put Astro as the main villain. So that's where we did the major changes. We've also had to recomp everything. So actually, as you can see, the nukes have been added a second time. So these are actually duplicates of what were already there. I don't know if you can actually see, but if you actually look very closely, you can see outlines of yellow. That's because these were already placed before, but the only difference is we had to recomp the entire poster because it did not make sense to have RA9 at the top. So what we did was we put Astro instead, and everything else just followed suit. And then finally, the last poster that we did, this is the official poster of the season. This is Everything or Nothing. So as you can see, you got Dr. Yayakov at the top, you got Witch Ranger, the femme fatale, you got Blizzard, the heavyweight, Void Ranger on the side with his axe, Toby holding Mr. Jeeps, and of course you got the nanobots in the corner. Typical adventure that you would expect for Axum Rangers S, and also the full-length movie of Toby Robin Adventures, the only full-length movie of Toby Robin Adventures. And if ever you guys want to check it out, the actual story of Everything or Nothing is actually available here on DeviantArt. So if you click Everything or Nothing Part 1 by Biohazard Studios, you can actually read the full story. In fact, something funny that you should know, and yes, this is actually art from 00M, who actually did the story art for Everything or Nothing story. And again, it's divided into 3 parts. So actually what's also interesting, yes, as you can see, this is the battle in the crematorium. And actually what's funny about all of this, I actually recently went back to revisit this story, and thanks to Microsoft Word, I was able to put in all the corrections that were needed to fix spelling. So now basically it's still the same story, but now all the spelling has been fixed. If you want to go check it out, you can go ahead. I'll put the links in the description below. And this is basically the biggest story in the history of the Toby Robin series. And as I said, we were not playing when we said we were going to make it, and we actually did. We split the whole thing into a full season, Axum Rangers S Season 9, and then on top of that, because we wanted to make it a complete story, we then did something called a movie cut. Movie cut, for those of you that don't know, is basically when you take all the chunks of the episodes and you put them all into a full movie. Now, for those of you that don't know, Glitch Productions actually did that with their season of Meta Runner. In fact, if you actually check out the Glitch channel, you'll notice one of their videos is in fact Meta Runner Season 1, the movie cut. And so we did exactly the same thing here with Everything or Nothing. In fact, Everything or Nothing is actually supposed to be the final episode of Toby Robin Adventures, because after the 20 episodes, the Everything or Nothing story comes right after. And this happens way before Season 2. So that's definitely something to check out if you are into adventure, danger, and a bunch more besides. One thing I would like to mention is that you cannot make an animated story without the characters themselves. So what I did was I contacted 2 artists who were capable of creating sprite characters based off these drawings of Toby Robin, and everyone else besides. So actually what I did was I went to Justin Game Design first. And as you could see, this is Terry Blair and Jodie Fitzgerald in beta. So this was during the actual production of these characters. And I don't know if you can actually see, but if you actually zoom in, you can actually see Alpha Toby. So this is actually Toby before you all know her as the little glasses character from the series. So this is actually Toby now. This is the final version of Toby, and as you can see, she has the glasses, she has the smile and everything. Her uniform is a bit different, but that's because we wanted to give her more detail. This is from Alan's art called 60s Fashion, and basically what we did was we used that as a base reference for drawing Toby, because originally what we thought was, okay, do we really want to have Toby, Terry, and Jodie using the same sprite template? And the reason why we call this a template is because then we can actually edit this sprite completely. We can destroy the sprites and basically make new characters out of it. And that's what we used to actually make the other cast of characters, which you all know as Margaret, Doris, Patricia, Karen, and a bunch more besides. And so to do these characters, we had to create a template. And now, as you can see, Terry and Jodie, they were basically the perfect template for all of this. Toby, on the other hand, we unfortunately did not keep the design for Toby as the final product, but what we did instead was we used this sprite for Toby's mother, Caitlin. So actually, as you can see in this scene, we used this base for Toby's mother in the series. And basically, because she does appear in many scenes of the episode, we wanted to put her in as much as possible. We did keep the Justin Game Design series, but we did not use this reference as the base sprite. What we used instead were Terry and Jodie. So yeah, we can basically do whatever we want with these kinds of sprites. We can swap heads, we can swap clothing. In fact, that's exactly what I did for Terry and Jodie. This is Terry and Jodie sprites. As you can actually see here, this area here, these were the betas of Jodie and Terry. So as you can actually see, you had Terry wearing blue dress and Jodie was wearing yellow overalls. Again, this is a nod to the 60s fashion design from Alan. And so as you can actually see, when we actually look deeper, you can actually see this is definitely the base sprite that we started with for the 2 characters of Toby Robin. So we got Terry wearing her regular red and white uniform, we got Jodie wearing her Blue Jay Scouts, and then as you can see from later on, we swapped them. So now Jodie is wearing the uniform and Terry is actually wearing the Scout uniform as well. And that's the beauty about these base sprites. You can actually rip the heads apart, you can rip the uniform apart, you can basically make complete sprites out of these characters, and you're not limited to what's in front of you. In fact, again, as I said, these base sprites were basically what I used to create the majority of the characters. I mean, look at Vicky and Alex. I mean, these are characters from the Toby Robin series from the later episodes, and they were all created with the same base texture. The only difference is I had to do some editing in Adobe Photoshop to bring out all the colors and everything. But basically, these sisters are all in the Toby Robin series. The same goes for the rest of these characters, Margaret, Doris, etc. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you. The only character that I did have major difficulty in creating was definitely Lindsay Gray. This character, unfortunately, was definitely the biggest pain in the rear to actually make because of the fact that her hair was definitely not in our profiles of characters. So what we did was we actually took character of Sailor Jupiter. In fact, I can actually show you the actual sprite. Alright, so here we go. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Sailor Jupiter. So what we did for this character, Lindsay, we basically cut out Jupiter's hair. We pretty much reconstructed it completely to make it match her personality, and then we colored it completely red. We changed her uniform to blue because we wanted her to stand out as a different character compared to all the others. We can always change it back to red. I mean, like I said, this is a color profile. We can change it completely as we wish, but of course, most difficult character to create. And then of course we then had to put on all the walk animations and everything. And then we even went as far as to creating special custom made sprites. Like for example, you can actually see here Terry dressed as Princess Peach. And then of course Jody and Terry dressed in sports suits, because obviously because of the YouTube guidelines, I'm not gonna put them in bikinis, that's for sure. So I put them in sports suits instead to censor everything. And basically this is Terry, Jody, and all the rest of the characters. And then again, as I said before, I then put all the same templates for Margaret and Doris. This is actually the same template used for Terry and Jody. And I mean, with this template, we went really far with creating these characters. I can guarantee you that much. Toby, on the other hand, was definitely a completely different story. As you can see, Yoshi Man, 111.8. So basically, what we did with him was I contacted him and I said, can you make a reference art of Toby Robin, but make it look more realistic? So by that, I mean, can you add the glasses? Can you make it more? And so this is the result that we had. So this is Toby. This is the final version of Toby. And as you can see before you, I've done a lot of iterations of Toby. And basically, you can actually see Toby in her red and white dress. We also added a pink dress for special occasions. So that is basically her party dress. It was Diana's secret. We introduced Toby with her Blue Jay Scout uniform, and then after that, yeah, you can actually see up here, this is Toby in an astronaut suit. I don't know if you guys are aware, but we are currently in development of one of the biggest story arcs in the Toby Robin series, where Toby gets blasted off into space. And of course, to make sure that this happens, we made Toby in an astronaut suit. But she's not the only character that's going to be blasted in space. And of course, we gave her the cute little detective gear as Sherlock Holmes. And of course, we also added some walk animation. And again, we did Toby wearing the sports uniform because, again, I'm not going to put her in bikini because I have to follow guidelines and such. And of course, just for a special note to the fans, Toby Robin as Sailor Mars. So cosplay. It's definitely effective. And of course we have, on the side, we have Mr. Jeeps over here. And of course the Toby doll as seen in episode 2. So yeah, those are a lot of big changes that were made to Toby. And I have to thank Yoshi Man and Justin Game Design for their incredible work on this artwork. But that's not all, because apparently after all of this, we then went to all the male characters, because of course you can't have female characters by itself when you're looking at the story. When you read the story, you'll notice there are also male characters as well. So what we did was we did Dennis, we did Matt, and we did Jason, and they will be making their return in season 2, I can guarantee you. But what's funny is that what we did was we pretty much took the base of Terry and Jody's sprites, and we pretty much modified them to make them more male-oriented. So what we did was we made male uniforms, so basically long sleeve shirts, belts, and then long sleeve pants, and then we added them into every character possible. In fact, actually what's funny is that this is actually the same template I used to make maskless Void Ranger. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Void Ranger in civilian uniform. As you can see, he looks exactly like Matt. The only difference is he has his hair all the way down. Nobody knows what his eyes look like. And his uniform is actually blue because obviously Void Ranger, his signature color is blue, so he has to have everything blue. And then of course, as you can see again on the side, you have Void Ranger in his astronaut uniform because Void and Toby will be going into space, because that's pretty much the premise of the story Mystery of the Moonraker. And yes, I am referring to James Bond Moonraker because it's my favorite movie of all time, and this brings back space travel, which is unfortunately one of those stories that lately has been lacking in X-Men Rangers S. So I wanted to bring it to Toby Robin because, I mean, when was the last time we ever saw space travel between two amazing characters? This is definitely a story arc that will hopefully do the fans justice, but it will also tell an amazing story between good and evil. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not gonna lie, one thing I really love doing in the Toby Robin Adventures series is bringing in some continuity between both shows. So what do I mean by that? Well, basically, first things first, I'm actually gonna show you a couple of art that we used. So first things first, this is one of them. These are basically terrorist characters. These are terrorist sprites. And as you can see, these are really huge army gunmen. And I don't know if you notice, most of these characters have Axel Rangers heads on them. That's because these were the original characters that formed the 9 Dragons. These were a terrorist group in Axel Rangers. They basically went in and caused a lot of pandemonium inside Apopha's base in the original series. And what happened was they all got killed off. And then what I did was I used all the unmasked characters. So basically all these characters wearing these multicolored masks, these became the template characters for Toby Robin in case I wanted to make villains. And that's the cool thing about continuity, is because I get to reuse these characters from one series to the other in case I ever want to like kill off a character that we don't see anymore. I will do that, and this happens with many of these characters. Like, for example, this character right here. This is a character from Everything or Nothing. He gets killed off immediately in the first scene of the movie. And then the same thing happens with these characters. A funny thing I need to mention is the fact that even these goblins from the Toby Robin episode 4, these were all characters for Axel Rangers S. In fact, the very last time we ever saw these goblins was actually in an early episode of the new reboot. So actually, these characters, they definitely haven't been seen in a long time, and in Toby Robin Adventures, now you'll know exactly where they went off to, especially with the 3 characters, Gormish and Glomel. All 3 of these goblins are actually part of a group in Axel Rangers. They were basically 4 out of many goblins that have been terrorizing the kingdoms. And what happened was, after they went missing, now we see exactly where they ended off in. They ended off in the Tobyverse, where they basically kidnapped Toby and tried to eat her. Civilians, made by Smithy GCN. You got 2 kinds. We got the male and you got the female. So basically you'll see these in every single episode. These characters are basically the studio audience. So basically when you have a crowd like these characters right here, you'll know that there's danger, especially if ever they get attacked. So basically these are sacrificial goat files, as I like to call them, from the antivirus community, and they're basically the characters that get offed most of the time whenever there's danger. So you'll expect a lot of these characters to be in grave danger and everything. And of course, finally, just for classic Axel Rangers continuity based off the original series, Scarecrow, Void Ranger's pet Yeti, makes an appearance in Creature in the Cave. This character is in fact the creature in the cave in the episode of Toby Robin Adventures. He is basically Void Ranger's pet, Scarecrow, in the original series, when he basically helps Void Ranger in the final battle. And the fact that Scarecrow makes an appearance, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, he's actually my favorite character in the entire series because he brings a brute force, and yet he is adorable at the same time. It's the beauty about Toby Robin Adventures. You always get to use reusable characters whenever they see fit with the story, and this character has to be my favorite lovable little abominable snowman of all time. I can guarantee you that. And then comes the question. How do you make these characters? How do you make these stories? And this is a question I've been getting time and time again, and I am going to finally show it to you how I do it. So this is basically the template frame. This is basically 480 by 312. This is the standard template that I always use for Axel Rangers and Toby Robin. Let's bring in some Toby Robin sprites. Let's bring Toby herself. Let's actually bring Void Ranger as well. And I'll bring in a background just for the heck of it. I mean, I'm just gonna take a random background out of nowhere. I'm not even gonna put this scene in the series, but basically you'll get a perfect idea of what's happening in the behind the scenes footage. So I'm gonna take this beautiful Victorian house, this beautiful Victorian mansion. I'm gonna take this grassy piece right here. I'm gonna hit Control C, Control V, and I'm gonna paste it into this frame, and then from there we're gonna make a scene out of it. So first things first, I take Toby, and I'm gonna make her turn her head. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this sprite right here, Toby smiling, I'm gonna paste it, I'm gonna make it transparent because I want to remove the white background. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it to proportion. And the reason why I'm doing that is because usually paint does not play well with unproportional characters. They will really stretch your characters and destroy them as much as possible. So what I do is I make them proportional so that then after that it's much easier to animate and we can see the characters a lot better. Because if I do something like this, for example, you know it's destroyed. You know how bad it is. In fact, even if I do this, you know it's a destroyed character. I don't want to do that. I want to make it as beautiful and as neatly as possible. So this is actually a perfect size for Toby. And now she just turned her head. I'm going to see this as frame 2. And now we're going to bring in Void Ranger. This time I'm going to bring Void Ranger unmasked. Because obviously, Void Ranger unmasked, he's definitely the cute little blueberry boy that everybody loves. So, let's put him in the frame. Let's make him perfectly proportional to Toby. Okay, so his head is a bit big. So maybe tone it down a little bit. Maybe a bit more, and last but not least, there we go. So there we go, that's Void Ranger. He's walking along, and then what I do here is I go frame by frame by frame until I get to the stop scene, which I have Void Ranger in stand-up position, and then from there I pretty much put text, or if I want to make a fight scene, that's when things get out of hand, and that's when I have to start. Okay, I have to go online, search up WWE or any fight scene from any movie and try to replicate that. And then from there, and then here, let's put one more frame. Let's put this as 9, and then let's take a idle sprite, which what we like to call the standing sprite. We prefer to call it idle. Let's make it again. Let's make it proportional to Toby. Maybe put his head a bit smaller. And there we go. Void and Toby meeting face to face. Let's just put some dialogue. I'm just gonna put some blue because of course it's Void Ranger's color. I put rectangle. Put the fill to solid. No need to touch the outline. That's not necessary. And then from here we go to Void Ranger. And there's a reason why I put these kinds of sprites, like these heads and everything, these floating heads. These are speech bubble heads, and what I do is, if I want to know which character is talking, I would usually put the heads of these characters and I paste them into the scene. And then from there, I basically put, okay, usually I'd go light gray, 25% gray, and my usual font, this is not bloody, it's Arial Black. Arial Black is the standard font for Axel Rangers S and Toby Robin Adventures. If I have to end the Toby Robin series, like the actual episode, I would have to put it as a comic book font, because that's pretty much the font used in the intro, in the title, and a bunch more besides. So I'm using Arial Black. I'm changing the size to 16, and I'm gonna put warning
Good morning, Toby. Come here, you.
And of course, you know exactly what the next scene is going to be. I'm just gonna play by ear here, and we're just gonna improvise on this one. So I'm just gonna have a ready-made. There we go. There's our sprite. Now, again, this scene itself is not actually gonna be in the episode. I'm just showing you how I normally do the sprites and everything. So then make it proportional. There we go. They're locking lips. And finally, let's just duplicate the color. There we go. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Boyd and Toby are kissing. And if you want to go really extreme, you can even show that they're kissing by putting some hearts. So usually it would just be like a little visual effect. So, and there you have it. So you got Boyd, Toby kissing. You got some hearts in the background, and then we can break from it by putting in the previous sprite before the speech bubble. And for that, 14, and then we can actually play back the entire animation. So basically, we just did a whole scene of Void and Toby kissing. So basically, as we can see here, Void walks up to Toby, and Toby turns her head.
Good morning, Toby. Come here, you.
And of course, they kiss, bubbles, and that's it. That is how you do a simple scene for AXA Rangers or Toby Robin, provided that you have the right tools. Now, sometimes you don't have to use Microsoft Paint. You can always use Clip Studio. You can use Adobe Photoshop. In fact, actually what's funny is that Adobe Photoshop is what we use to do ghosts. And yes, we do believe in a supernatural world in AXA Rangers S. So what I'm going to do for you guys, for a big example, is I'm going to imitate a ghost character in this scene. So what I'm going to do, first I'm going to open up the scene here. I'm going to take the brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick it to light blue, because light blue is obviously the color of the supernatural in AXA Rangers. And I'm just going to paint over. So I'm just going to paint over, make it like a smoke, kind of like fog, if you will. Not too much. Okay, unfortunately I overdid it in this scene, but we're just gonna save it as it is. If I were to actually make an episode, I would spend a bit more time on this. But let's open up Photoshop. Photoshop is opening as we speak. Photoshop is loading. And by the way, one amazing thing that I love about this version of Photoshop, this is Photoshop Elements. So if you love the Creative Cloud, but you don't want to pay subscription, the Photoshop Elements is definitely the bundle, because with Photoshop Elements you get Photoshop and Premiere all together in a complete package for a very cheap price. I mean, we're talking $200. I mean, for $120 you can get either Photoshop or Premiere. It's your choice, or you can get the complete bundle. And the best part about it, it's all perpetual. You don't have to pay extra fees a month. So that's definitely a big plus, especially if you are a fan of Adobe and you want to continue to use their software. Downside, you do not get third-party support. So forget about third-party support. You won't be getting that. But it is a home version, because that's what we use for all the extra stuff, like for example coloring characters, changing colors of already created characters, or in this case we are making ghosts. So let's put this at 65. That's perfect. Let's use the wand tool to get rid of the white, and there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. We just created a ghost. So let's put him into the frame, and congratulations, we just added Ghost. So ladies and gentlemen, we know that Lord Vindock is watching Toby and Vic. And yes, you heard me, Vic. Vic is the official civilian name of Void Ranger. Void Ranger doesn't know it yet, but he will eventually. Okay, no, I do not want to save it, because I do not want to save the project file. And there we go, ladies and gentlemen. We just created a full frame animation, Void and Toby kissing, and then we added a ghost of Lord Vindok into the frame as well. Now, how is that for a simple animation? But usually I would not do this because, first of all, in order to do this, I have to create a story that would make sense. So usually what I would do is I would write a story into this book. This is my official Axum Rangers book, and what I did was I pretty much used half the book to write 3 seasons of it, and then from what I write, I animate it through what is happening. This is what I have to do for every single show, whether it's Toby Robin or Axum Rangers X. This book is definitely my wake-up call, because this is what I have to animate. It's what is written in this book. What choice do I have in making an episode if I don't have something written before me? If I don't have a script or a story, then what is there to animate? I mean, just like this scene itself that you're seeing before you. I just thought about it in the back of my head, and you know what? I can flush it as well, because I didn't write a story for it. It's that simple. And actually, sometimes I would even take it to the extreme by using software that you cannot find in the public. Like, for example, Fusion 17, which I don't know if you guys are aware of, but I have the USB key, which has the license. This is what I use for visual effects. This is what I use to make all the green screens, all the fires, all the explosions, and all the basic laser blasts that you all expect from Axum Rangers S. In fact, Fusion is the reason why I experimented with the RCH-1 weapon as seen in Everything or Nothing, the final episode. And with that, I've also gone ahead and used software such as Lightwave, 3ds Max, or my current weapon of choice, Cinema 4D. Now, why did I do this? Because I wanted to bring some variety into the series. And now, speaking of Season 1, let's talk about Season 1. Let's go through the play-by-play with the pros and cons that I had to do in making this entire season. The Quicksand Report and the Mystery of the Jeweler's Jalopy, those were a lot of fun. I will be honest. I had a lot of fun making these episodes. And we even went as far as to bring in actual voice actors and as well as text-to-speech voices. So, for example, I can give you examples of very good text-to-speech voices that I've been using since the series even began. We got the ever-classic Voice Forge that every Go Animate animator would normally use. We have 15 AI. This is actually a true story. We were actually thinking about using 15 AI as a text-to-speech for Toby's character. But at the end of the day, we decided, nah, it's not worth it using a character such as, for example, Twilight Sparkle from MLP. I mean, it wouldn't make sense, and it's not natural because, I mean, let's face it, the voice architecture of 15 AI, it's good, but it's not completely humanly accurate. And we brought in some real voice talent into the division, and we've used their voices for the actual characters, but we still retained the same style as what we thought of the character. So, for example, Golden Fox, who is the voice of Toby Robin O'Keefe, I asked her if she can imitate Twilight Sparkle, because the first thing that came to mind is, okay, Toby Robin, she's definitely the smartest character, so she has to have some kind of Twilight Sparkle kind of voice. So I asked her, can you do that? She gave me her audition, she was accepted. And then came Terry Blair, I asked her, Irish accent? Bob's your uncle. Jodie Fitzgerald, I turned to one of my friends on Amino, and she did amazing job. Sailor Saturn 13, she is definitely an amazing voice for Jodie Fitzgerald. Again, she sounds definitely Irish and a bit of British as well. And then we got some other voice actresses as well later along the line. This is Nuance. This is another text-to-speech voice that I use. This is I used for the villains of the Toby Robin Adventures. And finally, Vocodes. This is another classic 15 AI kind of voice engine. The thing about this one is that you got all kinds of different characters. You got Sonic, SpongeBob, Homer Simpson, Bob Barker. You got Christopher Lee from Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. Even got characters like Squidward, Tommy Wiseau, Tupac Shakur, and you even have presidential characters like Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and a bunch more besides. And most of the characters in the story are text-to-speech based. So basically, most of the villains will be text-to-speech. Then, for episodes 3 to 9, these were actually written by Yusuke Jumba, whom I already showed you the treasure trove of Toby Robin Adventure stories. And what I did was I pretty much copied every single line within the book, transcribed it into a full story, and ladies and gentlemen, as you saw within the episode, what you see is basically what you get. The only thing is, episode 7 was actually the very first episode of Toby Robin where I introduced Cinema 4D into the pipeline when we started putting in all those log cabin scenes, and from there, we brought the story into great lengths by bringing in all these new environments like the river, the woods, and everything. And then Toby Robin Adventures episode 8, I'm not gonna lie, this was the most difficult one to do because it was also the last episode that I had to do before vacation. And this was way before what happened with the pandemic and everything, but basically what happened, episode 8 was definitely the most difficult because this one I had to do a lot of character. I literally had to take these sprites, pull them apart, make new sprites out of them because I wanted to introduce Toby in her Blue Jay outfit. So to do that, I had to rip her dress out, I had to rip her arms, rip her body, and paste in the Blue Jay outfit. And then I had to do that for all the sprites that I wanted to animate for Toby. In doing so, it was a pain in the rear, but at the end of the day, it was worth it because now we get to see Toby in her Blue Jay outfit rather than just her regular white and red outfit. So with that, we can literally customize these characters as much as possible. And then came episodes 12 and 13. This, ladies and gentlemen, was the very first story arc of Toby Robin Adventures. Now, usually what I do with story arcs, Action Rangers, for example, I usually divide a full story into different separate parts. For example, the very first story arc that inspired me to create the Toby Robin series, Control Alt Delete, that was a 3-part story arc. So, for example, the very first story arc, which is episode 12 and 13, The Experiment by Yusuke Jumba, it's a 2-part story arc. The same can be said for Trouble with Tendrils and the Harlequin of Hell. In fact, Trouble with Tendrils and the Harlequin of Hell are actually the final 4 episodes of season 1. Then came episode 16. Now, episode 16, I'm not gonna lie, it was definitely the most difficult episode to make because, first of all, it was fan-made and it was definitely broken up into 6 parts. So what I did was I put them all into one story, but I had to make some major changes because obviously this is YouTube guidelines we're talking about. I have to censor as much as possible to make everything PG-13 for the audience to enjoy. So I had to make lots of major changes in order for the story to make sense. But you know what? It's as they always say, at the end of the day, the story will always be better than the animation. And you know what? Most of the time, it's true. And then after that, we went on to the final 2 story arcs, which were Trouble with Tendrils and the Harlequin of Hell. Trouble with Tendrils was definitely, we get to see the Tendrils again from episode 3, and we get to see them have fun with Terry and Toby by, you know, hurting them, electrocuting them, and whatsoever. We finally get to see the Tendrils that we saw earlier in the series. And finally, the Harlequin of Hell is basically the debut of Lilim and Imp Alan's characters that he's hand-drawn for years and years, we finally get to see them in action against Toby and Terry. And there was only one little minor nuisance to Toby Robin episode 20. Unfortunately for that, it was the fact that the story was actually never finished. And by that meaning, when you actually read the story, you are left with a cliffhanger, but the question is, did they survive? Did they die? What happened? We want to know. Now the problem was, we couldn't really find out because by the time we reached the end of the story, that was it. That was part 6. And there hasn't been a part 7 ever since. So I was forced to actually write my own ending as to how I would see the ending be completed. Now, unfortunately, that ending is never going to happen because I don't know if Yusaku Jumba will ever write a part 7 into the story, but basically what happened was they throw the kids out of the UFO, they fly away, and they leave them to die. But basically what happens in the end, all the girls survive the fall, and happy ending for everybody. But it's also very suspenseful because when Lilim does see on the camera that Toby survives, she says, "The Lord of the Night will return very much alive." And that of course implies the next big story arc that's going to be coming in season 2, which is another original story which I created, Yusaku Jumba's Mask, which will bring out the return of Yusaku Jumba for the very last time. Now, speaking of villains, this, ladies and gentlemen, is Yusaku Jumba. This is basically the character design that I made for him. Basically, it's this black blob of the night. So basically what he does is he sneaks in, kind of like a snake. And obviously the yellow eyes, it basically shows that he is the Lord of the Night. But I do have plans of altering his character, especially for Yusaku Jumba's Mask, where we actually finally get to see the real Yusaku Jumba in human form. And we're going to be seeing a lot of that, especially in Yusaku Jumba's Mask. But basically, this is the template character of Yusaku Jumba in Season 1. So you see this a lot in the majority of the episodes. And then you have Alan's characters, Lilim and Imp. These were original characters created in sprite form by PolyEdit 2000. And basically what I did was I took the sprites, altered them, modified them heavily, and created this. And then of course, to add continuity to Alan's designs, I made the speech bubbles of Imp and Lilim. And of course, I even added some extra poses. So for example, Lilim covering her arms so she can prepare the snake attack when she unleashes her snakes to Toby and Terry. And of course, I even did some paint editing to give Imp black eye, because obviously in the story, Jody attacks Imp and Imp returns with a black eye. And she's not happy. She says, "You go fetch her." And with that, we pretty much have the two main villains of the series. So Yusaku Jumba, Imp and Lilim, they're definitely a big threat and a nuisance in the series Toby Robin Season 1. So now there's just one question to ask ourselves. Where do we go from here? What is the next step in the Toby Robin Adventures? Well, I am happy to announce that I have completely wrote a couple of brand new stories from the ground up, and also I have found some fan-made stories as well. So for example, The Glass Ruby, Layer of the Octagon, and a bunch of other stories created by the fans themselves. Plus, as you can see from these drawings here, I've even wrote completely new stories, like for example, if Toby ever met a clone of her, or the classic movie Clue. I wanted to do a parody of that. Or what if Toby was captured by ants? There's a lot of amazing possibilities that can get Toby into such peril. In fact, my favorite poster out of all of these is, of course, the big story arc that I'm building up, Mystery of the Moonraker. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited for this one. This is definitely the story to tell the audience, and I mean, the hype is real. For the first time ever, after many long years, Void and Toby reunite to have a space battle to save the Earth, and that's pretty much where Toby is gonna go from there. She's gonna go into brand new adventures with her friends, and then she's gonna blast off into space, because that's pretty much the best way to top off an entire series before we have the final battle with Yusuke Jumba. There's a lot of big possibilities coming for the Toby Robin Adventures, and I cannot wait to get started on animating it. It's gonna be huge and it's gonna be big, I can guarantee you that. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all very much for joining me on this behind the scenes look at Toby Robin Adventures. If you guys like this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up, hit subscribe, I really do appreciate it, and ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all in the next video. Thank you very much, and peace out.